Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Heidi from My Reading Life, and I'm here today to film a recent and current reads video. So this is going to be all nonfiction today because I'm in the midst of Nonfiction November, and I'm really enjoying the nonfiction I've been reading. I've completed 4 books in the last week or so, all from my November TBR, so I'm really pleased about my progress. The first book I completed is The Devil's Highway. This is a true story, and it's written by Luis Alberto Urrea. Now, this story follows 26 people from Mexico as they attempt to walk from Mexico into the United States across an area of the country called the Devil's Highway, which is in New Mexico. Which is in Arizona. They walk from Mexico to Arizona. It's in southern Arizona, obviously. And these 26 men have all paid money to some sort of shady underground operatives from Mexico who make it a business to sell these trips to very, very poor people from the southern part of Mexico. And they hire other really poor Mexicans called coyotes to guide the walkers as they try to traverse the desert. And of the 26 men who initially start this journey, only 14 survive. I believe it was 14. Only 12 of the men survive. And it's really harrowing to read their story. They literally walk into the desert, and their guide, who's a young kid, is new to the area where he's supposedly guiding these people, and he gets them lost, and then he abandons them, and more than half of them die. And it's just truly terrible to read about. But this author has gone back and he's reviewed all the case files and all the information he could find for each of these folks, where he could find it, some of the people were never identified, but the ones that were identified, he does his best to like put their stories together. And to a person, they've all, come from a very poor area around Veracruz, in southern Mexico. They don't have any resources. They've borrowed money in order to take this journey. They plan to work in the United States and return to their homes. Each of them for a different purpose, but all for things like sending their kids to school because it costs money to send your kids to school in Mexico, or building a piece onto their mother's home so they'll have an actual cement structure that's part of their home, or putting a new roof on the house. I mean, these are people who don't know where their next meal is coming from and see this as their only way to sort of get ahead and maybe have either a permanent shelter or schooling for their children, or some way to start a better way of life for themselves. It was truly, truly sad. The thing that I liked about this book was the author sort of gets the perspective from everyone, and he's very non-biased in his storytelling. So you get the Border Patrol, you get the coyotes' perspective, you get these walkers' perspective, you get other government officials' perspective, both from the Mexican side of the border and the U.S. side of the border. And you can see that beyond the sort of shady underground mobster type characters that are taking these people's money and promising them guided walks to the United States, really nobody is truly bad. Everybody's just trying to do their thing and make their livings, and in reality it's an untenable situation from all sides, and it really shows what a tangled problem border security is. And I think even though this book takes place in the early 2000s, so it's close to 20 years old now, there's a lot to be learned from it today. So highly recommend that book. The next book I completed was Moneyball by Michael Lewis, and this is the story of the Oakland A's general manager Billy Beane and his attempts to make baseball be more scientific in its methodology for picking players and for trying to win. Billy Beane hires some science nerds, basically some statisticians from very good colleges, and sets about hiring baseball players in a methodical way, and in doing so sort of upsets the apple cart in terms of how baseball players had been picked up until that time. I listened to this on audio, actually, and it's just simply fascinating. I could literally not care less about baseball statistics. I like baseball. I'm a Red Sox fan, and I watch baseball. But as far as, like, baseball statistics, I don't care, and I don't follow it. But this book is really fascinating in terms of the psychology of how baseball players are picked or had been picked up until this point in history, and how the face of the game was really changed by what Billy Beane did as a general manager for the Oakland A's. And so I would say if you're turned off of this because it's about baseball, don't be, because it's a lot more about statistics and psychology than it is about the sport of baseball necessarily. And I would definitely recommend it on audio. It's really a great story, and it's very engaging. And Michael Lewis just has a way where he can take a very complex mathematical subject and make it really understandable for a general audience and really interesting. So again, another winner of a book. I then finished this essay collection, Shakespeare Wrote for Money by Nick Hornby. This is a collection of his columns from a magazine called Believer in the United Kingdom, where he writes about what he's recently purchased for books and what he's recently read. And he weaves into these discussions of books that he's reading pop culture references, sort of broader thinking about the world and politics and other social issues. These are, if you are anybody that's a reader, would find these interesting. I think he reads widely. He reads everything from, books about football and cricket. When I say football, I mean not American football. I mean soccer. And cricket, all the way to, he reads general fiction and classics and deep, weighty nonfiction tomes. So he's reading a little bit of everything and really bringing that to the table in these essays, and that's really fun. I also finished a second essay collection, and that's Small Wonder by Barbara Kingsolver. Now, I started reading this, I started listening to this as an audiobook. I had downloaded from the library, had some technical difficulties with that audiobook when I was about 75% of the way through, and so was able to actually find the hard copy edition at my local library, which I was very thankful for, and finished up reading this in the physical copy. These essays are just simply gorgeous. They're essays that Kingsolver wrote in the early 2000s, specifically after 9/11, and they interweave her thoughts on that tragedy and the American response to it, as well as nature writing as the natural world. So you get a little bit of nature writing, you get a little bit of philosophy about how nations respond to terrorist attacks. There's writings at the end about her reading life, books she's reading, and how reading impacts her life and how writing impacts her life. And then there's essays about what patriotism means and what patriotism in a time where your country is at war and you're being asked to support that war, and if you don't, you're not patriotic. What that means and how she reacts to that. There's books about there's an essay that's she's writing to her daughter about what she wants her daughter to know, and then there's an essay where she's writing to her mother about things things that she and her mother have had difficulty dealing with in the past, and how she feels about those things in the present day now that she's a mother herself. Just beautiful. Barbara Kingsolver, I mean, I've read her fiction. She can write. I love her fiction, but her nonfiction essays, I would highly, highly encourage you to read these. These are beautiful. I am going to be getting myself a copy of this book so that I can underline and annotate and refer to this again and again, because I think her thinking and the way that she expresses herself is just simply so profound and so beautiful, and I just want to be able to refer to it again in the future. So those are the 4 books that I've completed so far, all 4 of which were wonderful reads and very successful, so I'm excited about that. I've also been reading Janesville, An American Story by Amy Goldstein. I'm reading a buddy reading this with Doris over at Aldi Books. This is a journalist's account of how one town in Wisconsin deals with the closure of a GM manufacturing facility that's been in their town for like 100 years. I mean, it started out as like a tractor manufacturing facility and morphed into a GM manufacturing facility, and it was the largest employer in town. There were ancillary businesses that had sprouted up to provide the supplies to this automotive manufacturing facility, who also go out of business at the same time, leaving thousands of people without jobs in this area. And it's all about how the town responds to that. It's about individuals who were laid off and how they respond to it. It's about the politicians in Wisconsin, one of whom is Paul Ryan, just so you'll know, how they respond to it. This all takes place during 2007, 2008, and then afterwards. So the recession hits, the plant closes in 2008, and then it's the reverberations and how the town deals with it from then on into, I think it goes into like 2013. So this is fascinating, relevant. It's just heartbreaking in parts, but also uplifting in parts. You can see by my tabs how much I'm finding to discuss with Doris. We're having some very long Voxer conversations about this book. It really makes you think about how we as a society deal with, or how we don't deal with, the fact that, you know, up until about 2008, you could graduate from high school and get a good job at one of these manufacturing facilities and work there your whole life and make well above a minimum wage type situation with benefits. And then what happens when that goes away and you've never been trained to do anything else, and there's no other jobs in your area anyway, even if you were trained? I know that that's happened in my area. I'm sure that it's happened in your area too. If that's a topic that interests you, highly recommend Janesville. I just started today to read the essays in Not That Bad, Dispatches from Rape Culture, which is edited by Roxane Gay. I read her introduction and then the first essay, which is called Fragments by Aubrey Hirsch. And so this is exactly what it says on the tin. This is a collection of essays written by a variety of authors, all about their encounters and their experiences with rape, sexual assault, and other types of sexual encounters, negative, that people have to deal with in today's society. And the first essay was very powerful, and I expect that the rest of the essays will be very powerful as well, and I will have to intersperse other things with reading these essays. My audiobook currently is not a book that was on my initial TBR, but it's Unbroken by Laura Hillenbrand. I'm sure you've heard of this book. This is a World War II story. There's been a movie made of it. It's been sitting on my TBR pile for quite a while. This was a book that was lent to me by a friend of mine, and for whatever reason I just hadn't gotten to it yet, and I checked at my library, my online library. My library's online system had the audiobook available to me. So I downloaded it and started listening to it, and I'm already 30% of the way in. This is an excellent story. It's written very well. It's very exciting. If it was a novel, I would call it plot-driven, but it's nonfiction, so it's very exciting. This is the story of Louis Zamperini, who is a young man from California who, as he was growing up, was a running phenomenon. He competed in the Olympics he competed in the Berlin Olympics, which was the last Olympics before World War II started, and he was only like 17 or 18 or 19 years old at the time. He was very young. Anyway, and he broke all kinds of records. And then he gets drafted and becomes a bomber, or part of a bomber crew. When the United States goes to war, he also gets sent, and he's in the South Pacific Theater. And so far, I'm just at the part where he's been flying some bombing missions in the South Pacific, and his plane's been shot up, and there's all kinds of stuff happening, and it's very, very compelling on audio, and it's like a listening to a movie being played in your ears. So very much enjoying that. And then I'm about 100 pages into my big behemoth biography of Ulysses S. Grant by Ron Chernow. So far, Grant has grown up, joined the military, has fought in the Mexican-American War, and is now married with 2 young children and separated from his family because he's been posted to California during the gold rush. Grant is a fascinating character, flawed, but also heroic in many ways. He was very empathetic to people who he felt were being mistreated. So enjoying learning more about Grant. That's where I'm at with nonfiction. I have no fiction books on the go. I'm just straight on nonfiction for now in the month of November. Very much enjoying myself. I hope you have found some nonfiction to pick up in the month of November. Tell me all about it in the comments down below, and I will talk to you later.